Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. So the Diablo 4 Campfire chat patch 1.11 has just finished, and we've gone over the information that they wanted to present to us. And I gotta say, there's some pretty crazy stuff in here that they told us. I'm gonna start with the thing that busted out on me like the worst right off the bat, that really kind of slapped me in the face. Felt like I was a little baby coming out of a womb, and all of a sudden I just had... Oh, why they do that? All right, I'm gonna scroll down my list here, and I'm gonna bring this one up because this one hit me in the face. Everybody and their mama has been complaining about not being able to zoom in and not being able to zoom out. Okay, everybody and their mama. I don't care who you is. Every single person has made a complaint about this. I've seen Asmongold make a complaint about it. I've made a complaint about it. Half the people in my kinship have complained about it. Every single person in the world complains about this that comes into my stream chat. They're like, why can't we zoom out? All right. You know what they told us? You know what they told us was the actual reason why we couldn't zoom out? Graphical performance. That's the reason they told us. Was the reason why we can't zoom out, because graphical performance. Because if there's more stuff on the screen, then the graphical performance of the game is going to decrease. This is a trick that has been used for decades. Have you guys ever heard of the term aspect ratio? The basically, like when you get into a game and you have like the field of view, your field of vision, right? When they started making console games, they made your field of vision really small, so you couldn't see nothing. Because it was a trick. It was a trick to make the consoles perform better, because if you could see less on the screen, then the game would perform better. You'd get a higher frame rate because you can see less on the screen. They basically just told us that the reason why we can't zoom out is because it's performance, and if they let us zoom out, it would ruin the performance of the game and across all the platforms. They basically said, well, if the Xbox can zoom out and the PS can zoom out and then the PC can zoom out, then one of them is going to be clearly the superior one, because like the PC, for instance, some guy's going to be running a 4090 with a 64 gigs of RAM and a god tier processor like a 5800X 3D, and he's going to be zooming out and he's going to see the whole battlefield at 120 FPS, and the PlayStation user is going to do it too, and he's not going to be able to see 120 FPS. He's only going to be able to see 20 because we didn't really optimize the game properly for the console. So he's going to have horrible frame rate because things aren't set up right. This is the stupidest reason in the world, and this is straight up one of them console bullcrap things that comes out of the world. Literally, where they optimize the console to the point where you literally can't even zoom out the camera, because if you zoom it out or you increase the field of view even a tiny bit, the whole game just starts falling apart. And they may very well be correct. It might be 100% accurate. Maybe on the PlayStation and on the Xbox, when it zooms out, maybe the whole thing crashes and burns, and literally your PlayStation 4 lights on fire. I don't know. But this is a really crappy reason to make it so that that everybody else can't zoom out. Everybody else shouldn't be stuck with a crappy zoom level just because the PlayStation 4 is in the mix, for instance, with a platter hard drive, and literally can't even play the game very well because it's like 10 years old and the hard drive's dying. Like, don't limit our performance based on the lowest common denominator. All right, let's move into some of the more interesting details. So they talked about buffing the Sorceress. And apparently the Sorceress has been using a kiss/curse mechanic. This is one of the first things he talked about. The kiss/curse mechanic. So basically what he said in a nutshell was the Sorceress has been developed under the idea that I need a... Here, I got the evil little creature from... I got the evil little creature from Star Wars. So the Sorceress has been under this thing. So the right hand gives him a kiss, and then the left hand smacks him in the side of the head, right? So the entire Sorceress has been designed around this. You always get something, and then after they give you something, they throw you literally, across the floor, and you smack your head into the wall. So they're talking about reducing the kiss curse mechanic. Apparently they realize that this hasn't really been the best case scenario, and they're talking about reducing some of the debuffs that are coming along with some of the kisses, which I mean, if every time I get a kiss, I also get a slap, I'm not really sure I'm going to want a kiss next time it comes in. But let me see if I can pull this up here. So we got the buffs here. I can backtrack just a little bit, and we can pull up some of the Sorceress buffs. The Sorceress buffs they were all up here on the screen. Zoom in way more, thank you. Yeah, I got 1337 viewers today. L337. Let's reload this. It doesn't seem to be working very well right now. Alright, let's fast forward to the buffs. Alright, so first off, this was the Sorceress changes, and they started talking about these. Let me go ahead and mute this. Flickering Firebolt, they're changing it so that it generates 2 mana when it hits an enemy. So it used to only generate 2 mana when it hit a burning enemy, so they're making things more generic. I'm not exactly sure this is the right way to go, making things more generically good as opposed to individually good, but I guess if that's the way they want to change things. They also increased the fireball radius by 50%. So fireball increases its radius by 50%, which is kind of insane. They also increased the fireball's critical strike damage by 20%. It seems like they see that people aren't using fireball, and yeah, I mean, a lot of people really aren't using fireball. They nerfed the crap out of Chain Lightning back in the beta, and it looks like they're finally dialing back some of those changes. So each time Chain Lightning bounces, the next hit deals 5% increased damage. And then also the change to form Crackling Energy has been increased by 5% as well. And then we had a lot more changes to the Sorceress than that. I don't know. Veer's Mastery, the damage bonus was increased from 10 to 15%. Isu's Ferocity, they made it so that the bonuses are granted when you're hitting bosses with critical strikes. So you're actually going to be able to utilize Isu's Ferocity when you're actually fighting bosses. So that was another thing that they changed. Combustion, 20% increased, plus an additional 2% per unique source of burning. So they kind of beefed up Combustion a little bit as well. It looks like in general they're kind of trying to make the Sorceress more damage, but I don't really see why damage is so important at this particular moment. I feel like the main problem that Sorceresses have is not damage, it's usually the opposite. They also talked about increasing the damage reduction. So they increased a lot of the glyphs. There's a 5% increase from the reinforced glyph, 5% increase from the territorial glyph, a huge increase from the warding glyph from 13 to 25%, which is pretty massive. I mean, across the board, you're talking about 5, 10, what is that, 15, 16, 17, so about a 17% DR increase right there. And then you also have the Keeper of the Flames node, which is damage reduction increased by 4%, 4 to 5, so that's a 1% increase. But this is one of those ones that you usually have 2 of in a board, so that's a 2% increase on both points. So you're getting like a total 4%. So we're talking about almost like a 20% damage reduction increase across the board. I mean, it definitely does seem like they're trying to make the Sorceress a little bit more tanky. The Smoldering Flames, also another 1% increase, and the bonus a 1% increase, so that's another 2% there. And then the Guarded Rare node, damage reduction from vulnerable enemies, another 2% increase. So you got a 2, and then another oppressive rare node, another 1% there. It seems like they just generally increase the survivability of the Sorceress across the board. So you may notice just in general, even if you just log into your Sorceress without changing anything, you're going to be a lot more tanky than you were before. They also increased the maximum life bonus, and this one's kind of interesting because the 6%, the 2% here, I actually discovered recently that these maximum life bonuses are cumulative, which means they actually increase the more of them that you have. So this is probably a much bigger increase than just 2%. I could go over that later and talk about it, but it's kind of convoluted. It basically just has something to do with the way that the maximum health bonuses stack on top of each other. They also changed some of the aspects as well. So the Hydra got a little bit of a buff here. Instead of taking away the damage when you get an additional Hydra, now the duration is increased for the additional Hydra. So that one actually got a little bit of a buff. They gave a damage buff to the aspect of Conflagration, the aspect of Engulfing Flames, the aspect of 3 curses. was changed to increase critical strike damage of the meteor and the fireball. It looks like I'm not really sure the sorceress needed all these damage buffs, but some of these things like Hydra have definitely been kind of nerfed into oblivion. The Hydra's not really all that amazing. The Flame Walker's aspect being increased from 4 to 6 seconds was kind of nice. A lot of these buffs are always too short, so a little bit more duration on these is definitely nice. And the damage reduction was taken away from the gravitational aspect for the ball lightning. That was actually a pretty interesting one as well. I don't really think a lot of people didn't use that one. I've actually seen quite a few people use that one. Let's see. And then we have the recharging aspect. Each time the chain lightning bounces, you gain 2 to 3 mana. The bonus chain lightning bounces from the aspect of broken tether was increased from 2 to 4. So chain lightning has gotten a big buff in this patch. The bonus movement speed from the charge aspect again increased from 4 to 8. It does seem like a lot of these bonus, these little buffs and things have been very, very small, and quite honestly, it's awful. I'm kind of am happy to see them increasing some of the duration of some of these. Johnny up to no good. They said the patch is going to be out on the 8th, so August 8th. We're going to get the patch notes on the 2nd though. New legendary Mage Lords aspect. If you guys have been following my stream at all, you know that I've actually been talking about this one, and I've been trying to find this one, and I think a lot of people have been trying to find this one. Supposedly it's in the game, and we thought it was in the game. But apparently it's not in the game. It was never in the game. Or maybe they took it out of the game. Maybe it was in the game and then they took it out of the game. I don't know exactly what's going on, but it's here now. So this is the one that makes your character a lot tankier, and I was talking about this one last night. The Veer's Mastery key passive damage reduction is increased by 20 to 30% for each close enemy, up to 60 to 90%. So this one right here is a way that you can make your character very tanky. If you're using the Veer's Mastery key passive, you can use the Mage Lord's aspect to beef it up. Frozen aspect of the Frozen Orbit, which is the Frozen Orb aspect, got a damage bump of 10%. And I think we're moving into... Yes, we got the Stormwell Swell. So Storm Swell got a buff. The Snow Veiled aspect got a duration increase. Also grants 10% bonus armor for 3 to 5 seconds. I'm not sure if they realize that the armor on the Sorceress is just really bad, and then that's not really going to help them very much, but maybe they don't understand that. The Incendiary aspect skill has up to a 12 to 17% chance to restore 10 mana. Snow Guard's aspect chance changed to while within your own blizzard, and for 2 seconds after leaving it, you take 20 to 25% less damage. So Blizzard users are going to get a little bit of a damage increase while they're standing inside their own Blizzard. That also works well with the enchantment, I believe, that allows you to cast Blizzard on yourself every certain number of seconds, so you'll have a damage reduction there. Mana regeneration increased from the aspect of concentration from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50, and the duration requirement to gain its benefits reduced from 3 to 2 seconds. And I think there's one more change. Yes, the Gloves of the Illuminator. So a very interesting change for the Gloves of the Illuminator. They reduced the damage penalty. They seem to be intent on making Fireball useful. And the Gloves of the Illuminator were never really a bad pair of gloves. The main issue with the Gloves of the Illuminator is just that they're focused on Fireball, and Fireball isn't very good. So what they did was they reduced the bounce distance so that instead of it going like boom, 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 right? Instead of going like that, it's more like boom, 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 boom. So it's going to bounce closer together, which means you're going to be able to hit a target multiple times with it. And should make them a little bit more desirable if you want to try and do a Fireball build. I know Fireball's not really the build everybody's focusing on at this particular point. And I think that moves us into the Barbarian. So the Barbarian got a bunch of very odd changes. I'm not really sure why they needed Fury increases across the board on all their basic skills, but I mean, I guess having more Fury means you can use more core skills, and having more core skills means more fun or something. I'm not really 100% sure why they're focused on this. I never really felt like the Fury generation of the character was really all that bad. In fact, it seems to me that most barbarians obtain most of their fury from other sources, right? Like, I mean, when I played mine, I was getting half of my fury from things like, my shouts and like the umbral ring and just like Mother's Embrace. If I had like a really nice AOE attack, like there's tons of ways that you can get your resources back that don't necessarily have to do with using your basic abilities. So I'm not really entirely sure why they focused on that so much. Double Swing did need a buff. It's a little underpowered, so a buff there was actually pretty nice. Rupture, that got buffed 4 times in the previous patch, by the way. I'm not sure if you guys are keeping count, but Rupture got buffed 4 different times in the previous patch. They buffed it again. Rupture has always been an underperforming skill, and it's just never really been the most amazing. So it's interesting to see them focus on Rupture so much because of how badly it underperforms. Maybe it'll actually be worth something in the upcoming patch. I do plan on once I get my Druid to level 100, I do plan on taking another stab at a Bleed Barbarian, so maybe I'll give Rupture a try and see how they've changed it. Charge has got a buff of 30% damage. It's a pretty high damage increase for Charge if you've been using Charge at all. And then Mighty Charge, they increase the vulnerable duration from 2 to 4 seconds to make it more attractive there. As I've said before, these really short durations have always been really stupid. I don't know what anybody's doing with a 2-second vulnerability. It's like hit the monster, and it's like 1, 2, and you hit them like 1 time with an attack in between the time when they're vulnerable and then they're suddenly not vulnerable. It's yeah, yeah. Next, let's see here. So, Violent Upheaval, they're changing Upheaval a little bit. So if Upheaval damages at least 2 enemies or a boss, you gain Berserking for 2 seconds, increased to 3, and if it damages at least 4 enemies. The passive's Aggressive Resistance damage reduction was increased from 3 to 4%. I'm not entirely sure that Barbarian was really having all that much trouble with damage reduction. It's really the Sorceress and the Necromancer that have the most issue with damage reduction. But, the Necromancer has something that makes him completely immune, so that's a whole nother thing. Gushing Wounds, bleed damage dealt increased on critical damage bonus, increased from 100 to 115. So they're touching on the bleed barbarian quite a bit, and also they made it so that when you overpower, you get a huge bonus. They increased it from 11% to 70%. So this right here shows that they're really focused on overpower, and I don't know exactly why they're focused on overpower so much, but I guess it's just because it's so underperforming. In fact, I have that in my notes here, and it made me laugh when they were talking about it, because I pretty much summed up exactly what he meant, and he said everything is overshadowing overpower. Overpower is being overpowered, and I kind of chuckled because. Because basically everything in the game right now is making Overpower look like a chump. Like, it doesn't do what they want it to do. It doesn't perform the way they want it to perform. And I get it. It's a mechanic that they've invested in and they want people to utilize it. But as it is right now, unless you're specifically building Overpower, you don't want it in your build. And even if you are specifically building Overpower, you probably still don't want it in your build. They haven't made it attractive enough that anybody actually wants to utilize it. Walking Arsenal getting easier was a little strange. I've never heard anybody tell me it was too difficult to activate the Walking Arsenal buff. But they said they increased the duration of it from 6 to 8 seconds so that it's easier to activate. I was always under the impression that anybody that utilized the Walking Arsenal buff usually had no trouble with it whatsoever. But when I utilized it, I didn't really have any trouble with it either. But I guess making it last a little bit longer, like I said, perfectly fine. Moving on to the next slide here. Aspect of Ancestral Forest damage increased by 8%. Thorns increased from the Death Wish aspect from 0.75 to 0.85. That's a flat damage aspect, so you're not going to see it until you get into the game. But a 0.1 increase at the top end is actually pretty massive. Aspect of the Unrelenting Fury core skill cost to refund increased from 10 to 20 to 20 to 30. Additional functionality cost refund also in granting when hitting bosses. So I think they realize that a lot of these aspects, although they're very nice in trash mobs and big giant groups of monsters, they are relatively useless on bosses and single targets and very difficult, like elites that are by themselves. And in general, across the board, it seems like they're making changes so that some of these aspects are actually working, or at least partially working, when you're attacking a boss, because it doesn't make much sense to build for only one part of the game. It's very difficult to build to only one part of the game. Like, if I want to build for single target, then I build for single target, but then I'm screwed for AoE. If I want to build for AoE, and then I go to fight the boss, and then the boss is like, ha, you built for AoE, you're screwed, and he stomps me into the dirt. So they seem to be making a lot of changes here that involve, like, the bosses getting things that will trigger the effects of those AoE damage aspects. Aspect of Ancestral Charge, damage increased from 50 to 100 to 125%, so a 25% bonus there. The aspect of the Burning Rage, damage increased from 0.28 to 0.38, another 0.1 increase on the flat damage aspect. Aspect of the Bull Kathos, so they didn't actually increase the damage reduction on the aspect of Bull Kathos, but they did reduce the spread. So I've used this on my Earthquake Barbarian, and it was pretty powerful, but it was very difficult to find a 25%. In fact, I don't think I ever did find a 25%er. But they did up the bottom end from 5 to 15%, which was a pretty big bump up. Earthquake aspect bonus, also same thing. They increased the 5 to 15. So it's going to be a lot easier to get your aspect of Bulkathos and your Earthquake's aspect in a much better condition, as opposed to always finding the really low-end ones that are basically garbage. And they gave another buff to Fields of Crimson. This is the 6th buff to Rupture at this point, by the way, because Fields of Crimson is a unique item specifically for the Barbarian. And using Rupture. So they increased the flat damage aspect by 0.04. They also increased the damage that enemy takes while inside the pool from 15 to 20%. And they also replaced the Rupture cooldown reduction affix with a bonus critical strike damage affix. Honestly, with all of the changes that they've made to Rupture so far and Fields of Crimson, they've made 2 changes to Fields of Crimson and 5 changes to Rupture at this particular point. It's not even the same skill anymore. I'm going to have to remake my video on Fields of Crimson. Hellhammer, damage increased from 0.6.8 to 0.8.5 to 1.1. So a pretty big buff there to the Hellhammer's flat damage aspect. Burning duration also increased from 3 to 4 seconds, and damage to crowd-controlled enemies affix was replaced with bonus critical strike damage. Ramaladi's Magnum Opus. The physical damage affix was replaced with vulnerable damage, making Ramaladi's a little bit more attractive as well. 100,000 steps, attack, reduce, evade cooldown, replaced with bonus evade charges. I think they realized that people enjoy those bonus evade charges more than they like the evade cooldown reduction. And it's actually kind of silly because on the pants and on the boots, there's literally like 2 aspects that are preferred over all the others. On the boots, it's almost always at maximum evade charges, and on the pants, it's almost always the barrier, the 30% maximum life as barrier. And Battle Trance, I'm not really too thrilled about this one. They replaced the basic skill damage with cooldown reduction. I actually really like basic skill damage. I built a basic skill Barbarian off of this, so it kind of nerfs me. And Battle Trance is really kind of set around a basic skill Barbarian, so I'm not really too enthused about this one. But I guess cooldown reduction is something that people like, so okay, whatever. They also increased the bonus attack speed to other skills from 10 to 20 to 35 to 45%. So Battle Trance is going to give you a lot more increased attack speed to other skills. I don't really know if this is actually going to work out very well, though, because the stacks on Frenzy only last for 3 seconds. So they could increase it to 100% increased attack speed or 300% increased attack speed for all I care, because it doesn't really matter, because as soon as you go to use another ability, any other ability, it's pretty much gone. Because after it doesn't take very long for a 3-second buff to disappear into the nether realms, and then you have to build the entire stack back up from the beginning. It's very difficult to take advantage of the increased attack speed on Battle Trance and the increased attack speed for other skills on Frenzy, because the duration is so low. They need to bump that up from 3 seconds to more like 6 seconds. And if they bump it up to 6 seconds, I think this would be a lot better change. And they wouldn't have to make this change to increase the attack speed. Just leave it at 20%, but increase the duration a little bit so that the duration of the Frenzy buff actually lasts long enough to be taken advantage of on other skills. Moving on. Get out of the way, doggy. So this was a kind of a weird one. I know this was supposed to be a Barbarian and Rogue video, but they started talking about other characters. They're talking about changing Rain of Arrows so that the first wave knocks down the enemies, increasing the poison trap tick damage from 0.095 to 0.12, increasing the caltrop damage bonus, making it so Forceful Arrow pierces every third cast, and then Invigorating Strike energy threshold increased from 50 to 75%. They also dialed back the change to Siphoning Strikes a little bit, so they nerfed Siphoning Strikes pretty hard, and Siphoning Strikes lucky hit chance was increased from 75% to 85%. So they nerfed Siphoning Strikes pretty nastily, and I think a lot of rogues were pretty upset about Siphoning Strikes getting nerfed. This is a little bit of a dial back on that nerf, but it's not a complete dial back. So they brought you up from a 75% lucky hit chance to an 85% lucky hit chance, which is still not going to bring you anywhere near close to what it was before the nerf, but it's definitely better than 75%. Victimized lucky hit chance was increased from 35% to 45%. I think this might also have to do with Siphoning Strikes, so that it's also technically increasing Siphoning Strikes a little bit more. Rugged damage reduction against damage over time effects increased as well, so they've got a bunch of DOT damage reduction here. So you can get as high as 27% off of this one now, which is a pretty high amount of damage reduction from damage over time effects, but at the same time, I'm kind of torn on this one. I don't know if you would really want to build protection directly against damage over time effects. But at the same time, damage over time effects are really nasty in Diablo 4. You're talking about poison, you know, freaking poison. Oh my god, poison. Just, I'm having nightmares, flashbacks to how many times my HP bar just drained away into nothingness from the poison effects. So maybe it's more useful than it seems. Aspect of Elusive Menace no longer requires hits to be from close enemies. Aspect of the Quickening Fog changed to you automatically drop Smoke Grenade at the end of the dash. Smoke Grenades reduce dash's cooldown by 0.4 to 0.6 seconds per target hit, up to 2 to 3 seconds. Next is the Druid. So the Druid got a bunch of spirit changes too. I'm not really sure why the Druid needed spirit changes, but whatever. This one always kind of boggles my mind. I'm not really sure why they're messing around with this stuff so much as they're messing around with this stuff. I feel like this stuff down here is more important than this stuff. And I know that sounds really vague, but I just don't understand why they're so focused on the basic skills and what the basic skills can do, when the majority of the player base is desperately trying to get away from the basic skills. We don't want to use the basic skills because the basic skills are mostly stupid, and we don't like them. Now, granted, there is some really nice Storm Strike and Claw buffs using the Great Staff of the Crone, and those builds using the Great Staff of the Crone are going to see ridiculous buffs from this. But for the most part, I think pretty much the entire player base, like across the board, is trying to get away from the basic skills because we don't really like them as much. And instead of increasing the amount of fury that they generate, the amount of spirit that they generate, just make them more useful so that we actually are interested in using them. If you make them more useful so that we're interested in using them, you won't have to make them so attractive in other ways. You know, like putting makeup on a pig, so to speak. The wolves getting a buff, I was actually kind of excited about this. I don't know why the passive damage on the wolves is always so low. So the passive damage on the wolves got a buff, and the active damage on the wolves got a buff, as well as the attack speed bonus got a buff. The damage bonus increased from 20 to 25%, and then also the fortify amount was increased by 5 to 8%. If you're unaware, the wolves are actually a really good way to fortify your character if you don't have any other option. Next was... Nope, we missed something. Go back, dial it back. The Ravens also got a passive damage bonus buff and an active damage bonus buff, and the additional functionality of the increased damage of the passive. So the passive that gives you more Ravens also now beefs up the Ravens' passive damage. And Rabies got a damage increase from 76% to 110%. I'm not sure what to think about Rabies. I tried to build a Rabies Druid a little while back, and I was just really unimpressed with Rabies overall, and maybe that's what it needed. Aspect of the Metamorphic Stone Spirit cost reduced from 60 to 50. Damage dealt increased from 80 to 100 to 100 to 120%. So a 20% buff there, and then also the cost reduced by 10. The aspect of the Alpha damage increased from 75 to 110 to 90 to 115. And then Mangled aspect resource gain increased from 1 to 3. Also, they buffed up the Overload class mechanic, which is kind of crazy. Me and Leon were actually just yesterday formulating a build revolving around all of the lightning effects, and Overload is one of them. And they increased the lucky hit on Overload from 20 to 40%. So it looks like that's going to be even better than it was before. The Necromancer, they did a little bit of cooldown reduction on Enhanced Bone Spirit. The Wither Legendary Board willpower requirement has been buffed quite a bit. Apparently that was underperforming. So they increased that from 2.5 to 4% per willpower. Or per 40 willpower. Legendaries, they changed the way that the aspect of the Empowering Reaper works so that it actually triggers on blight damage instead of just triggering on crit damage. And since blight can't technically crit, it was not performing correctly before. So now it should perform much better, is basically what they're saying. Now that it will trigger on the actual blight damage itself and not just the crit damage of non-blight attacks. Now, aspect of the Exposed Flesh was changed so that it works on all skills, not just bone skills. So, aspect of the Exposed Flesh is now ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. It used to only work on bone skills, and it was very useful for the Bone Necromancer, Bone Storm, Bone Splinters, Bone Spirit, etc. And now it is absolutely insane. Yeah, sounds like it's going to be useful for just about every single build at this point. Big buff to the Necromancers overall. And that's not all. The aspect of decay damage increased from 20 to 40 to with a 5% buff on both min and max. And then this one right here kind of blew me away. Aspect of Torment. Essence regeneration has been increased dramatically from 20 to 30% to 90 to 170% essence regeneration. Holy Jesus. The aspect of Torment was already pretty good, and it kind of competed with the previous one that we were just talking about. And honestly, between the aspect of Torment and the aspect of Decayed Flesh, you now basically have two absolutely amazing essence regenerations on the Necromancer that are mind-bogglingly insane. Honestly, the Torment is probably better than the other one now. 170% regeneration is nuts. If you can get a good one. If you can find it, by the way. When I was playing on my Necromancer and I was trying to find the aspect of Torment, I think I found 2 aspects of Torment the entire time I was playing. From 1 to level 100, I found 2. So if you do find an aspect of Torment, you might want to hang on to it no matter what the percentage is, because chances are you're probably not going to find another one. The hulking aspect, so that's the one for the golem. Legendary category change from resource to utility, so that's a pretty big change. That's going to change what you could potentially put that aspect on. And then also chance for the golem to reduce its cooldown was increased by 1 to 4 to 2 to 5. This aspect was terrible. Every time I looked at it, it was terrible. Chance to spawn for golem to spawn a corpse was increased from 2% to 2.5. I think they're going to need to do a lot better to get people to use that aspect. I just don't really think that one's going to be all that useful. Greaves of the Empty Tomb intelligence affix was replaced with the bonus movement speed. And then right here, there was another change, and this is to monsters specifically. So they were talking about how Necromancer minions and Druid companions were getting killed too often. And it had to do with the fact that the certain evil effects that plague us all, like Shock Lance, Electric Obelisk, Fire Enchanted, and Balrog's Fire Breath, were basically just annihilating the minions from existence. So they're reducing the damage across the board on these abilities from monsters specifically to the minions, so that the minions stop getting absolutely annihilated by these affixes. And quite honestly, Fire Enchanted and Electric Obelisk and Shock Lance were three of the biggest ones right there, because as soon as a monster was Fire Enchanted, they would just wipe out your entire army, and there was nothing you could do about it. So that's a very good change overall. They also have the Caged Heart of Spellbreaking, a big buff to the Caged Heart of Spellbreaking. So this one is upon taking elemental damage, gain 10 to 20% damage reduction for 5 seconds. It used to be 10 to 20% damage reduction to the specific element that you took damage from. Now it's just a flat 10 to 20% damage reduction. So the Caged Heart of Spellbreaking is kind of got an insane buff to it. I think a lot of people are going to be looking for that one specifically. Now, this does mean that you actually have to take the damage before you get the damage reduction, which could potentially still mean you end up getting one shot, because if you get hit in the face with fire that's strong enough to kill you, before the effect actually takes place, well, then I guess you're still going to be dead anyway. And then Temerity. They talked about Temerity. And I promised I would talk about this and why the change they made still isn't going to make it useful. But let me see if I can just do this real quick. So, pardon the eyes. So one of the things that they changed is they made it so that the barrier is actually going to scale with your maximum life. So it used to be 80% of base max life, and now it's going to be 80% of max life. All right, so they've increased the barrier. Yay. So depending on how much HP you have, your barrier could now be, 15,000 barrier, right? The problem with this is that it doesn't really matter. The change that they made doesn't really make this better, and I'm going to demonstrate this really quickly with a little bit of math. So if you take a person who has 15,000 HP, and you give him a 15,000 barrier, and let's say this particular player is using Temerity. So if he's using Temerity, he probably has less damage reduction than you would otherwise normally have, because I can get probably about like 20% plus a 10% plus another 20%, or let's say another 10%, let's be fair, and then another 10%. So I can have a total of 4 damage reduction affixes on my pants, which at the end of the day is a pretty hefty amount of damage reduction. So I'm just missing that entirely. The barrier that you're getting from Temerity is missing all of that damage reduction. So the 15,000 HP barrier that you could potentially get is still basically useless, because it's not giving you the correct amount of damage reduction. For example, let's say, for instance, a monster was hitting me for 30,000 damage, and I have a 15,000 HP barrier, and I have 15,000 HP, which gives me an effective HP of 30,000, right? So when that monster hits me, if I have 0% damage reduction, I'm just dead. Because the 30,000 is going to come in, it's going to check that barrier, it's going to bash right through it like it doesn't exist, then it's going to bash right through my HP like that doesn't exist, and I'm going to be dead. All right, but if I have some damage reduction, let's say, for instance, if I have, say, 50% damage reduction, I can bring that down to 15k. Well, the 15k is still going to instantly smash the barrier. So it doesn't matter that I have 50% damage reduction, because the barrier is still going to get instantly demolished. The thing here, though, is that when you have this damage reduction is going to reduce it even further. So we're talking about, say, a monster hits me for 30,000 damage. So now I have 15,000 damage left, minus 20%, minus 10%. minus another 10%, minus another 10%. And the 15,000 goes down a lot further. And if we run that on a calculator real quick, you can just see the numbers. So we take 15,000 and we subtract 20%. Then we subtract another 10% from that. Then we subtract another 10% from that. Then we subtract another 10% from that. And this is what we're missing. So that 15,000 becomes 8,748. And notice now the barrier actually survives. So in the case where you actually have the damage reduction on your pants, where you have the 4 modifiers on your pants that can reduce your damage reduction by a certain percentage, the barrier will actually survive the damage that's coming in, as opposed to just simply immediately being deleted from existence. The problem with Temerity is not the size of the barrier. It's the fact that the barrier has nothing behind it making it tanky. So there's no damage reduction there to actually make the barrier absorb the damage properly. It just gets instantly deleted. I don't really think it's still going to be useful, but it's more useful now than it was before. I will say that. It's more useful now than it was before, okay? But it's still not going to be better than just running a really nice pair of pants with 4 damage modifiers on them. So if you run a really nice pair of pants with 4 DR mods, it is still going to be better than Temerity, bar none. Let's go over the rest of everything they talked about. So I got notes here. Let's go over my notes so that I don't miss anything. They talked about early game buffs for the Barbarian. I don't really know why they're so focused on early game buffs. I feel like the Barbarian's just fine early game. I didn't have any problems with him. They talked about making uniques more attractive in general, and they're not just talking about the Barbarian and the Sorceress. They're talking about across the board. And judging by the way that they showed us some examples, so they did give us an example of the Hellhammer, which I'm not exactly sure where that was. There it is. So they did give us an example of the Hellhammer, and in the Hellhammer example, they showed that they were changing some of the damage buffs in the way that they functioned. So, for instance, instead of damage to crowd control enemies, it's going to be critical strike damage now. Honestly, this is a good change. A lot of these uniques, the reason why they're so poor is because the stat choices on them are poor. Most people would never pick some of the things that are on these items. And I know everybody, as they pointed out in the video, everyone wants to utilize crit and vulnerable and, crowd control damage and things like that. But the problem is that, yes, we do want to utilize that stuff, and these items don't have any of those modifiers on them. Like when you find a pair of gloves like Goer's Devastating Grips and there's no critical strike chance on them. And then you're like, well, without critical strike chance, I think I'd be better off utilizing a regular pair of gloves that have crit on them and a +4 to core skills. And that's another one, +4 to core skills. When you have a unique item that doesn't give you the bonus to the core skills on your gloves, or when you're utilizing a weapon that doesn't give you any kind of bonus to the actual ability past, specific effects. Like damage reduction from enemies that are burning is nice. That's a pretty nice one. But I'm not really too enthused about all of the modifiers that they've put on the unique items, and quite a few of them could use some changes. Definitely need some changes to make them more in line with what players would actually like to see on those unique items. And it looks like they're going to make some of those changes. As they said, they were going to be buffing the uniques across the board. And while all the uniques don't need buffs, there are definitely some uniques that are really powerful and don't need any kind of buffs whatsoever. There are definitely quite a few that could use some changes and modifications to make them more in line with what we need. Changing effects to be more widely useful as opposed to singularly useful. So they talked about this during the campfire, and basically what they were going over was certain abilities are very pinpoint, abilities. It's like you get this effect when this thing happens, and if this thing happens, then you can have a chance that this thing happens, right? And that they're all so tightly bound to exactly what they're supposed to be used for. They talked about kind of expanding it out a little bit so they're not so tightly focused on one particular use case scenario. Um, I think a lot of us have kind of shied away from utilizing a lot of this stuff because a lot of these items and a lot of these aspects are very much so focused on too much on one individual aspect of something, and you can't really use them on the broader spectrum. One example that they gave us of this was like a lot of the times you'll go to a boss fight and you realize that the aspect that you have on is completely useless versus a boss. And they're making it changes so that the aspects are going to be useful versus the boss and in the wider gameplay. So that when you go to the boss, you're not like, oh, well, I'm not set up for bosses, and the boss is just going to stomp me into the dirt. They talked about making overpower damage more useful, and I'm not really 100% sure that they're going to be able to do this because I feel like the way that they have overpower set up with a 3% crit chance or a 3% chance to proc is just way too low. I don't think they're going to be able to do it, to be honest. Especially if the way that they want to do it is to make everything else less attractive, which seems to be their goal at this particular point, which is like every single time we look at something and people are utilizing it and it's amazing, they're like no, this is too amazing and it makes that thing look less amazing, so we're going to nerf the too amazing thing to make the other thing look amazing. They don't need to nerf anything else to make overpower look amazing because it's not going to work. They need to buff up overpower in a way that makes overpower actually interesting, because as it is right now, overpower just doesn't really make an interesting case in most situations. And even the classes that utilize overpower tend to shy away from it for more efficient bonuses. They've got to find a way to make overpower more interesting than what it is right now if they really want us to use it more often. Enabling scaling of flat damage aspects. So they talked about this, how there's a lot of flat damage aspects within the game, flat damage bonuses. Earthquake was one of the specific ones that they talked about, and they kind of made a point to say that they realize that the damage output of these particular abilities is falling off toward the end game, and because they're flat damage aspects, they don't really hold up, in the more intense fighting of higher levels, because the damage is good at earlier levels, and then as you level up, the damage kind of lags behind everything else until eventually you're utilizing your earthquake aspect, and the damage that it's putting on the ground isn't really all that great. So they're talking about scaling properly, or more properly, the flat damage aspects so that they more accurately follow all the other damage types, essentially, so that you can utilize earthquake and things like that in higher levels and actually get some decent damage out of the earthquake, as opposed to right now it seems like the damage aspect is doing basically nothing in the higher levels, although you still get the really nice buffs though. So the 25% damage and the 25% damage reduction that the two earthquakes provide in at the current moment are really nice, but the damage that actually comes from them isn't as good. They talked about utility versus damage, and specifically they were talking about ultimates with this. So a lot of the times when you use an ultimate, instead of using the ultimate for damage output, you're more or less just using the ultimate for the utility that it represents. And I've talked about this a lot with people on my streams about utility versus damage, that you have to understand the difference between utility and damage, and you can't expect damage from a utility skill. But what they're kind of getting at is that some of these abilities were never meant to be utility skills. They were meant to be damage skills. And apparently we're using them as utility skills when they were meant to feel like a ultimate, essentially. And the reason why they pointed out ultimates with this specifically was because what they were saying was that the ultimates are currently underperforming. They're not giving you that feeling of like, oh, unlimited power, Instead, you're just using them for the utility that they represent and not the damage that they have to offer. So they're talking about buffing up the abilities that they want to deal more damage, to do more damage, so that they can be utilized for their damage output and not just their utility. He did give us the date for the patch notes. I think I said that already, but it's going to be, we're going to get the patch notes on August 2nd, which is Wednesday. We're going to get the patch notes on Wednesday, and then the actual patch is going to be on the 8th. So that's going to be on Tuesday the following week. So we're going to have a full week to go over the patch notes and give them hell for it if they're all awful. They talked again about the monster density increase in Nightmare Sigils and HellTides. That is still coming, so they're going to be increasing the density. I do believe they showed us a map of the density increases. Where was that? I know for a fact they showed us the density increases. I just can't remember where it was hiding. There it is. All right, so this is the density in before pre-density buff, and then they show us the density increase. So that's the density before and after. So let me see if I can get that on the slow-mo replay here, and we can kind of overlay the two. So this is before. And this is after. And it definitely does seem like a considerable density increase between the two. You can kind of see them both at the same time here. So the dark red dots are the before, and the light red dots, the barely visible red dots, is the after. So it definitely is quite a bit of a density increase between the two. I have a feeling we're gonna see a lot of deaths. And the reason why I think this is because they haven't addressed the crowd control issues yet. They haven't addressed the problems with the some of the nastier things within the game. So I guess we'll find out. They talked about guaranteed legendary from bosses and Legion. I don't even know why this is a thing. This seems really weird. I don't think anybody had any trouble finding legendaries. I feel like this is some form of appeasement. Like they're trying to just give us more items because they're sorry. Like, here, we're sorry, have a legendary. Here, we're sorry, have a legendary. Here, we're sorry, have a Chinchilla. I mean, I didn't really think that they needed to do this. I'm not really 100% sure why. They also addressed the loot goblin apparently not dropping legendary items, and apparently he was set to a 50% chance of a legendary drop, which is pretty high, but they talked about how everybody would just have like no drop from the goblin, and how people thought it was much lower than that. Well, apparently after level 15, there's going to be a 100% chance for a legendary item from the loot goblin. But the thing here is, I don't really know why they're focusing on this when they should focus on other things with the loot goblin. I mean, make it feel special to chase the loot goblin, not just free loot. I always thought the loot goblin was fun to chase in Diablo 3 because of the portals. The portal to the other realm and whatnot that you could potentially get from him, and the puzzle rings and whatnot, but, whatever. They also talked about reducing the respec cost by 40% and the additional stash tab that's going to be coming. Apparently, we're just going to be able to buy the additional stash tab on August 8th when the patch comes out, so it'll just be you're just going to have to spend like 400k and get yourself an additional stash tab. They are reverting the change for leaving dungeons back to 3 seconds. And they kind of explained the reason why they increased it in the first place was basically because people were exploiting the leave dungeon. The 3 seconds was too short, and they were essentially exploiting the leave dungeon to get out of dangerous situations really quickly. Because why not just, if you're in a dangerous situation, just leave dungeon if that works. Just escape. I can understand why they increased it in the first place, although I don't really understand why they turned it back, except for the fact that people whined and complained about it. I'm all for preventing exploits. That's my mantra. They talked about changing Nightmare Dungeon affixes, removing the Resource Drain mod, removing the Cold Enchanted mod, and removing the Backstabber mod. I'm pretty sure that for the most part, whenever anyone saw Resource Drain, it was just instant garbage. So as soon as you saw the Resource Drain on a sigil, you just immediately threw it away, which certainly makes a lot of sense because the same thing with me. I think I played around with it a little bit when I first started playing, and it was so bad that I just couldn't do anything. The monsters would literally just boop you on the nose. They're just like, boop, all your resources gone. Boop, all your resources gone. Boop, all your resources gone. And you just literally couldn't do anything in the dungeon. You were just constantly empty on resource, and you couldn't even fight back. So having that one go away is good. And the backstabber one, I really didn't enjoy that one either. To be honest, it was very difficult to control the positioning of your character, and some characters, like the Whirlwind Barbarian, just couldn't control the positioning of their character at all because you're whirlwinding through the enemy, right? So if the enemy's standing here and you're whirlwinding through the enemy, right? You're facing the enemy. Well, you whirlwind through them and then out the other side, and guess what? Now your back is facing the enemy, and so the enemy turns around and just hits you in the back and one-shots you for the backstabber. It didn't really seem like a very fair or very fun mechanic, and neither does the Cold Enchanted one, honestly. It doesn't seem like a very fun or very fair mechanic. So I can understand why they removed these, and they also talked about additional changes to the Nightmare Dungeon affixes. But one of the things that they did not tell us about at all, and I actually asked this question in Twitch chat, was when is the Magic Find sigil coming back? Like, they still haven't addressed that at all. So I'm going to add this in here as not addressed. They seem to have skirted this question entirely, and I don't know why. Late game EXP, density will increase as EXP increases. So one of the things that you got to think about is that the more monsters there are in the dungeon, the more EXP you're going to get. Because you're going to be killing more monsters, and each monster gives EXP. So the EXP is going to go up a lot when the density increases. They talked about crowd control issues and fixing crowd control spam. Although, to be quite honest, I didn't really hear like a solid answer on what they planned to do with it. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me. They talked about it, and they were like, and we understand that it's an issue, and, going forward, we have some plans, and plans within plans, and there's also a jar on the desk, and we throw a quarter in every single time a cold enchanted monster kills somebody. But I didn't really, maybe I missed it, and you guys can correct me on that in the comments, but I didn't really hear what their actual plan for was of addressing the problem of the CC spam. I have died to it many times on stream. I'll literally just be fighting a pack of monsters. I hit my unstoppable button. The cold enchanted monsters literally just start wailing on me. My unstoppable goes down. I'm stuck in a frozen effect, and I'm basically just like this, and I'm like I'm just slowly dying. And I'm like, yep, I'm not getting out of this one. My cooldown's on cooldown, so I guess I'm just stuck, and I'm just like, and I'm stuck in an infinite freaking crowd control until I finally die. But they didn't really say what they were going to do. They also talked about apparently how imperfectly balanced and a couple other skills say that you can put more points into them than you actually can. And they talked that they were going to be addressing them. Resistances. They talked about specifically resistances, and I really kind of felt weirded out by the whole conversation because it went back to that whole, like, we don't want people to die when they're, have 0% fire resistance and they come against a fire monster. And then he also said we don't want anyone to be fire immune, and that made me kind of laugh because has that ever existed in any video game, really? I mean, even in Diablo 2, if you had 95% fire resistance and you were running fire absorption, there were oftentimes still monsters that could somehow kill you through it. I remember many times with 95% lightning resistance and lightning absorption, I could go into PvP and a lightning sorceress could overwhelm the lightning resistance and the lightning absorption and still kill me anyway. Who is really worried about this? I mean, unless their coding is really just that bad, it shouldn't be an issue. And if I want to stack fire resistance to the moon so that I'm mostly fire immune, why can't I do that? I'm not going to be immune to fire, but I'm also sacrificing large amounts of my equipment to gain this fire resistance, so why not let me get my massive amounts of fire resistance? I don't really understand why this is an issue, and I don't really understand why this is an issue. If you have 0% fire resistance and you get hit by a fire monster, you should die. That's how it works. It's something that you learn as you play video games. You're like, oh, I have 0% poison resistance, and that monster stabbed me in the eye with a scorpion needle, and I got hit with massive gonorrhea poison, and I died from poison. Well, look at me. Maybe I should get some poison resistance equipment, and then you do, and then the next time you fight the monster, you don't get your butt handed to you. It seems like they're too afraid of babying us. I don't really know how else to put it other than that. They're afraid of both sides of the equation. It seems like they're desperately afraid of min/maxers making themselves into fire gods that can walk through the sun and lick flames. And apparently, at the same time, they're also apparently afraid that the noobs won't put on any fire-resistant gear. And will die to a candle. It's like some sort of really weird, horrible, like, just I can't even explain it. I don't understand what's going on here. Like, do they really think that everybody's so stupid that they won't know to put on fire resistance equipment? And then at the same time, do they really have that lack of faith in their own system and the way that they have their game design, that they really think that us being able to stack a little bit of fire resistance is somehow going to make us into fire gods that can play in the sun and lick flames for a living? There's got to be some sort of in-between, right? You know, hey, I put on some fire resistance gear, and look, fire doesn't kill me as bad anymore. They got to fix this, and they need to stop being afraid of both sides of the equation. If somebody has 0% fire resistance, like if player A has 0% fire res and fights a fire monster, let him die. Stop coddling the player base, okay? He can learn to put on a little fire resistance equipment. It's not really that difficult. You don't have to coddle the player into oblivion, all right? There's no reason to coddle the player. And on the other side of the equation, all you have to do is cap the maximum resistance so we can't get any further. So we cannot become literally like Thor himself by stacking lightning resistance. It's called a cap, guys. Like it's it's called a resistance cap. Okay? Find the resistance cap and make it. Put the cap in the game. Done. You don't have to worry about it anymore, because guess what? We can't go over the cap. And even if we get to the cap, even if we're at the 75% cap or whatever it is that you decide, done. We can't get any further. We're not gonna turn into the fire god living in the sun and swimming around because you capped us. You capped us at firefighter. Now we're just a firefighter wearing firefighter gear, and we can still die to fire. You know, firefighters die to fire all the time. It's a sad thing, but you know, you can only protect yourself from fire so much, right? So they're capped on their resistance. You got a maximum fire resistance that you can possibly achieve. Put the cap in, and we're done. They talked about mounts being jankety, and they even referenced the Carbot video, and I was laughing about it. They even talked about, apparently there was a bug on console, so apparently the boost is not stacking on console like it's supposed to, and also him getting stuck on everything. So hopefully they actually do fix this, because the mount really does need to be fixed. At least they acknowledged it and laughed at the Carbot video that was literally making fun of the mount. If you guys haven't seen the Carbot video, you totally should, by the way. I already covered Overpower, so we're going to ignore that. This one I covered at the beginning, but let's talk about it one more time. They gave us an excuse, which was basically performance. We can't let you zoom out because the performance of the game would be negatively affected. Very, very strange. Very weird. Big Daddy Blizzard is watching, by the way, so this was an interesting one. kind of an odd comment at toward the end of the performance here. And basically what they said is if no one equips a particular aspect, we can see that, right? So they know we're not using specific things. They know we're not using specific uniques. They know we're not using specific aspects. They know we're not using specific skills. They know we're not using specific passives. They know we're not using specific weapons and all that jazz. They can see what we're doing and what we're not doing. They probably have a graph, and it probably shows all the most popular skills and all the most popular abilities and aspects and everything. And they can see when we're not using something. So they know when something is unpopular and basically useless. They're not clueless on this. So when you have an aspect that nobody uses, they know that we're not using it. They know we're not. They know we don't like that stupid thing. Hey, Brandon, thanks for the $5, man. I love my girlfriend, but I have to put in every point for my girlfriend because she just doesn't get it. I mean, she'll figure it out eventually, though. My girlfriend surprises me on a regular basis. Full disclosure, I am usually way better at video games than my girlfriend is to start. And it takes her a little while to get it. Takes her a little while to learn. And after about one day, she's better than me. One day. She has some sort of really strange way of learning video games where she just goes full tilt. She's like either completely terrible at the game or like a megalomaniac, amazing, crazy person at a game. And it might seem like she's having trouble, but she's just learning. And then eventually she gets better. She gets better than me at the friggin' game. I remember when I first introduced her to Stardew Valley, she was terrible at it. She couldn't even fish. And like one day later, she had a frickin' house that was bigger than mine. She was married to a husband. She had kids. She had a full frickin' everything. She had achievements I hadn't even unlocked yet. It was absolutely crazy. I think I've covered pretty much everything in this, and I guess at this point it's pretty much just me putting in some of my 2 cents. So first off, I want to see the full patch notes. I do like some of the direction that they're taking for some of these changes. They've dialed back on some of the changes, some of the more horrible changes. They have increased the survivability of the Sorceress quite a bit. It'll be interesting to see how much that actually works out to be. The Barbarian changes look interesting. They're focusing on some of the more underused things like the flat damage aspects, which are actually pretty cool. I really like the Earthquake stuff. They talked about beefing up the Earthquake. They talked about going over all the unique items. I like what they're doing. I really didn't like some of the excuses they had for some of the reasons why they did things. The zoom feature one right off the bat was just absolutely insane. This one boggles my mind that this is even still a thing to this day. Why are we still getting held down by the consoles? Because the consoles are incapable of having the correct frame rates without FOV adjustment and zooming. I mean, they literally said that the reason why they were not letting us zoom out was because the performance of the game would drop if they let that happen. So being able to zoom out is going to somehow drastically affect the performance. Now, it's not going to affect the performance on PC. It's not going to affect the performance on like PS5 probably and Xbox One X, but I guarantee you it's going to affect the performance on PS4 and Xbox One. I guarantee you it's going to affect the performance on those. So if they let you zoom out on the older consoles, it's probably going to straight up just make your console light on fire, which is hilarious. I mean, PvP, it's not an issue if everybody can zoom out. If everybody can zoom out, it's not an issue. But that's basically what we're talking about here, is that this zoom out issue, this zoom out problem is essentially we are being held back by the older consoles. So that's basically what they told us at this point. So we are being held back by the older consoles. I think that's pretty much it. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos. Stick around if you want to play some Diablo with me. I'm just gonna try to get to level 100 today. I'm level 92, working on 93, and we're gonna try and get to level 100 today. So the live stream's not gonna end, but this is the end of the recording for the recap.